قال المصنف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy upon him. فصل, section. والمتروك من الصلاة ثلاثة أشياء. Three types of things could be, might be abandoned in the prayer. فرض وسنة وهيئة. An obligation, that means an integral. A recommendation, that's called the sunnah here, refers to the type that if you miss it, you should prostrate for forgetfulness. وهيئة, what we called it, a protocol or a form of the prayer. But hay'a does, in more literal sense, mean form. Those are those smaller recommended things of the prayer, like lifting your hands or putting your hands between your chest and your navel, or sitting briefly before you stand up from sujood. فَالْفَرْضُ لَا يَنُوبُ عَنْهُ سُجُودُ السَّهْوِ. The obligation is not replaced by the prostration of forgetfulness. It's not replaced. Not that you don't do it. It's not that you're not going to do a prostration of forgetfulness, but it's not going to replace it. That means you're still going to have to do that obligation. Even if you're going to do a sujood of forgetfulness because of missing that, which we'll talk about inshallah, but you still have to do it. You can't skip it all together and then say that sujood of forgetfulness will replace it. It is not replaced by sujood of forgetfulness. بل إن ذكره والزمان قريب أتى به. Rather, if one remembered the obligation that he forgot and the time is close, then he performs it. The time is close. What does that mean? Well, either you're still in the prayer or you're out of the prayer. Like you might have said your salam and then you remembered. So you got out of the prayer and then you remembered. So if the time is close after you finished your prayer, then you're going to just continue your prayer. Like you never said salam. Just go back to where you messed up. You don't have to start over from the beginning if the time is close. Just go right back to where you messed up and continue as if you never did salam. If you're still inside the prayer, then you interrupt whatever position you're in and go right back to the obligation that you forgot. وَبَنَى عَلَيْهِ, and then you build from there. وَسَجَدَ لِلسَّهُ, and then before you say the salam, you will prostrate for the forgetfulness. This prostration is called the prostration of forgetfulness, not because it's restricted to the case of forgetting. In all cases, you can never do it unless you forgot. No. But because usually you're going to do it because you forgot. الشرح, the explanation. سجود السهو مشروع للخلل الحاصل في الصلاة. The prostration of forgetfulness is sanctioned for a defect that happens to the prayer. سواء في ذلك الصلاة الفرض أو النفل. Whether that were obligatory prayer or optional prayer. ثم ضابط سجود السهو إما بارتكاب شيء منهي عنه في الصلاة. Furthermore, the general rule for prostration of forgetfulness is that either you committed something, you did something that you were forbidden from doing in the prayer, كزيادة قيام, like standing up for a fifth rak'ah, or ruku', or bowing twice in one rak'ah, or sujood, or prostrating 3 times in one rak'ah, or qu'udin fi ghayri mahallihi, or sitting in the wrong spot, ala wajhi sahu, but all of that because you forgot. Or tarki ma'murin bih, or it will be because of abandoning something that you were commanded to do. Tarki ruku', like not bowing. You recited Al-Fatiha and went right to sujood. O sujood, or abandoning a prostration. O qiyam, or abandoning a standing. Like you prayed 3 rak'ahs of dhuhr. O qu'ud, O qu'udin wajib, or you didn't sit, an obligatory sitting. O tarki qira'atin wajiba, or you left out an obligatory recitation. وَقَدْ فَاتَ مَحَلُّهُ, and you got out of the position for that thing that you forgot. You went past the position of the thing you forgot. Like, what does that mean? Like, let's say you stood up to recite. And then you forgot to recite, but you didn't go out of the position for reciting. And then you remembered, so you recited. So you didn't get out of the position for that. Here we're talking about the person, he forgot something, and then he got out of the spot for that thing that he forgot and moved on. فَإِنَّهُ يَسْجُدُ لِلسَّهْوِ بَعْدَ تَدَارُكِ مَا تَرَكَهُ. Indeed, in these cases, one will prostrate for forgetfulness after catching what he left out. Meaning, we're talking about obligatory parts of the prayer here, so your sujood sahwi is not going to even replace that. So you're going to have to catch that, fix it, and then before you say your salam, you will prostrate for forgetfulness. ثم إن تذكر ذلك وهو في الصلاة أتى به وتمت صلاته. Now, if you remember what you forgot while you're still inside the prayer, you never said the salam to close your prayer out, then you just do whatever it is you forgot and build on that to complete your prayer. وَإِن تَذَكَرَهُ بَعْدَ السَّلَامِ نُظِرَ. And if you remembered what you left out after you said the salam, then the case is investigated. إن لم يطل الزمان تدارك ما فاته وسجد للسهو. If it were not a long time after saying the salam that you remembered, and we're not talking about your doubting here, we're talking about your sure. You only doubt that you left something out after you said the salam, then you ignore that doubt. Here we're talking about you are 100% positive that after you said the salam, you said, oh, I only prayed 2 rak'ahs. Oh, I didn't recite Fatiha or the like in such and such rak'ah. Then if the time after you said the salam or the time between saying the salam and remembering what you left out is short, then you just act as if you never even said the salam and you continue your prayer from where you messed up. وَإِن طَالَ اسْتَأْنَفَ الصَّلَاةِ مِنْ أَوَّلِهَا. But if the time were long, then you have to start over. وَلَا يَجُوزُ الْبِنَاءُ لِتَغَيُّرِ نَظْمِ الصَّلَاةِ بِطُولِ الْفَصْلِ. It wouldn't be enough to just finish the prayer from where you messed it up, because by having a long intermission between saying the salam and remembering your mistake, this corrupts the sequence of the prayer. This corrupts the sequence and the format of the prayer. So you just need to start over from the beginning. ثم حيث جاز البناء. Furthermore, whenever it's permissible for you to just complete your prayer from where you messed it up. You're talking about after you said the salam. So that means it wasn't a long time. فلا فرق بين أن يتكلم بعد السلام ويستدبر القبلة وبين ألا يفعل ذلك. Then it would not matter if you spoke after you said the salam, or even if you turned your back to the qibla. You said the salam, you spoke, you turned off of your qibla, and then you remembered. So what you do, just put yourself right back on your qibla and act as if you never said the salam and finish your prayer. ثم هذا عند تيقن المتروك. Furthermore, this is when you are certain about what was abandoned. أما إذا سلم من الصلاة وشك. But if you said the salam to end the prayer and then you only doubted and you're not sure for sure, هل ترك ركنا أو ركعة. After you said that salam, you said, did I leave out an integral? Did I leave out a rak'ah? فالمذهب الصحيح أنه لا يلزمه شيء. The correct way is that it is not obligatory on you to do anything. You don't have to respond to that doubt. And don't say, but what if I just want to be safe? If you don't do what I'm telling you now, then you might as well say to the devil, oh, devil, come and have a field day with me. وَصَلَاتُهُ مَعْضِيَةٌ مَعْضِيَةٌ عَلَى الصِّحَّةِ. One's prayer in this case is considered valid, meaning that's what you're going to consider it. لأن الظاهر أنه أتى بها بكمالها, because what seems to be the case is that you finished your prayer. وعروض الشك كثير, and instances of doubt are frequent. لا سيما عند طول الزمان, especially after a long time. Yani, you would be more likely to doubt something after long passage of time. Yani, what he's saying here is that we don't build on a doubt. Why are you not going to repeat your prayer or start from where you are doubting that you messed up? Because if you do that, then you will be taking your doubt as evidence. And the doubt is not evidence. That's the Shafi'i school. Rather, doubt is thrown away. And I'm going to reiterate, don't say, let me do it just in case. I'm afraid for myself. Don't do that. Because the devil's going to get you if you do that. You're going to become somebody who has waswas. Because that means that the devil knows that you will react to a doubt. And then what's he going to do to you? He's going to make you doubt everything. And then you're going to be one of those people who wash your face 10 times, you wash your arms 7 times, and you wipe your head 4 times, 5 times. It's going to take you 15 minutes to make wudu, and you're going to say Allahu Akbar 5 times, 6 times, etc. It takes you 10 minutes to pray 4 rak'ahs. Once it was said that once a person passed by another, he heard that person shouting, "You liar, O enemy of God!" So to that person, he said, "What's wrong with you?" He said, "This devil, he always bothers me, he haunts me. Anytime I urinate, he makes me doubt if I contaminated myself. So I made it my business to make a hole in which I could insert my member and then urinate into that hole and be sure that I did not contaminate myself. And then the devil told me that I got the urine on my back. So I said, you liar, O enemy of God." So look how the whispers would get some people. He said, can you repeat in what case the person will go back to praying after saying salam? Yes, when you're sure that you missed something, not when you're doubting. You said the salam, and then you were 100% positive with knowledge that you left out a rak'ah or a ruku' or a fatiha or the like. And it was not a long time. It was a short time. Then you just continue your prayer from the spot where you messed up, even if you spoke after you said the salam, and even if you turned your back to the qibla. Ameen wa fikum. وهذا بخلاف عروض الشك في الصلاة. And all of what I told you is different from having a doubt while you're still in the prayer. It's 2 different cases. Doubting in the prayer has a different judgment from doubting outside of the prayer. That doesn't mean you're going to use the doubt as evidence. The doubt is not evidence. So why would you have a different case then if the doubt is not evidence? Why don't I just ignore فإنه يبني على اليقين ويعمل بالأصل كما ذكره الشيخ من بعد. You're not still going to use the doubt as evidence. You're not going to use the doubt as evidence. You're going to throw the doubt away still. So then why is there a different judgment? There's a different judgment because If you're going to throw the doubt away, let me put it to you this way. Really, it's the same judgment. The issue is that you have a different circumstance. Same judgment, different circumstance, which is this. What's the same judgment? Same judgment is you're ignoring the doubt and you're taking what's original and you're going by the origin. You're ignoring your doubt and holding fast to your origin. The issue is you need to know what the origin is. That's why there's a difference. There's a different origin outside of the prayer than inside the prayer, but the rule is the same. What does origin mean? Origin means the original case. Meaning, if you said your salam, then usually, what's the original case? Why would you usually say your salam? Who knows the answer? Why would you originally, under normal circumstances, say the salam?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Because you finished the prayer according to your belief.
Yes, because you finished your prayer. So you finished your prayer. That means, when we say you finished your prayer, what does that mean? It means you did everything. So then you did everything you were supposed to do, and then you said the salam. So after that, if you doubt, then what's the origin here? The origin is that you finished your prayer. You wouldn't have said the salam had you not finished your prayer. So you throw the doubt away and stick to your origin, which is that you finished your prayer. If you're still inside the prayer, you don't have the same origin. Inside the prayer, your origin is that you have not done the act. Inside the prayer, the origin is that you have yet to do the act. Why? Because the origin of the act is that it doesn't exist. Origin of the act itself is that it doesn't exist. Like right now, are you reciting Al-Fatiha? Are you making ruku'? Are you sitting and reciting tashahhud? No, it doesn't exist. You're not doing that. So when you say Allahu Akbar to start your prayer, then you still have to recite Fatiha, you still have to bow, you still have to make sujood twice, you have to sit between the two sujoods, you still have to stand up for the next rak'ah, and then in that next rak'ah, you're going to have to bow and prostrate and sit between the two prostrations. So the origin is that those things don't exist. So as long as you're inside the prayer and then you doubt whether you did something, then you throw away the doubt and resort to your origin, which in this case is that you didn't do it. So, هذا بخلاف عروض الشك في الصلاة. This is different from having a doubt while inside the prayer. فإنه يبني على اليقين. In this case, you build on certainty. Certainty is what you know you did. That's what you're certain of. What you know you did, that's your certainty. That you don't throw that away because you know you did it. And whatever you're doubting, if you did it or not, you're not going to assume that you did it because the origin of that thing is that you haven't done it. وَيَعْمَلُ بِالْأَصْلِ كَمَا ذَكَرَهُ الشَّيْخُ مِنْ بَعْدُ. Just like the author is going to say later. فإذا شك في أثناء الصلاة هل صلى ثلاثا أم أربعة. And so if a person doubted inside of his prayer, did he pray 3 rak'ahs or 4? أخذ باليقين. Then he takes certainty. وأتى بركعة, which is what he's certain of, that he did 3. Because when he says, did I do 3 or 4? Either way, he's sure he did 3. So then, وأتى بركعة, he needs to do 1 more rak'ah because he cannot assume that he did that 4th one, even if he did. وَلَا يَنْفَعُهُ غَلَبَةُ الظَّنِّ. Very important. Being more sure is not useful. Being more sure that you did do it is not useful. أنه صلى 4 ولا أثر للاجتهاد في هذا الباب. And you cannot make an ijtihad also to determine if you prayed 3 or 4. ولا يجوز العمل فيه بقول الغير. And you cannot take another person's word about that. So that's an important case here. Because this is, you can't take another person's word here. So what if you're the imam and you're doubting? Did you pray 3 or 4? You cannot take another person's word here. What if you're sure? What if you doubted that you prayed 4, but you really did pray 4? and everyone who's behind you knows you prayed 4, and you're not sure, you just can't remember. So what do you do? What you have to do, it's your obligation, you need to stand up and pray 1 more rak'ah. And then everybody, all the brothers are saying, Subhanallah, Subhanallah, and all the sisters are clapping, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Okay, they might remind you. If they remind you, that means, okay, oh, now I remember, I did pray 4. Then it's fine. So now you're sure. But even with that, if it doesn't remind you, if you're still doubtful, despite all that subhanallah and all that clapping, you have to stand up and pray the 4th rak'ah. And whoever's behind you is not allowed to stand up to pray a 5th rak'ah. So they're going to have to break away from you. Or maybe they can wait for you. I don't recall if they can wait for you. We can ask, inshallah. But breaking away from you is an option. Can they wait? Can they stay seated and wait for you to pray that, and then you sit down and then they just continue with you? I don't remember. Maybe the answer will come. I don't think right here. Maybe in the Jama'ah section, but I don't remember. So if you want to ask, go ahead and ask. But don't ask me because I don't know. حتى لو قالوا له صليت 4 يقينا, even if they said to him, you definitely prayed 4. وهو شاك في نفسه, but he is for himself doubtful. لا يرجع إليهم, he does not resort to what they said. والأصل في ذلك قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. And the source for this is that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, إذا شك أحدكم في صلاته, if one of you doubted while in his prayer, فلم يدري كم صلى, and so he does not know how many he prayed, أثلاثا أم أربعة, was it 3 or 4, فليطرح الشك, then let him toss the doubt. وَلْيَبْنِ عَلَى مَسْتَيْقًا, and let him build upon what he's certain of. ثُمَّ يَسْجُدُ سَجْدَتَيْن, and then let him prostrate twice. قَبْلَ أَنْ يُسَلِّمْ, before saying the salam. فَإِنْ كَانَ صَلَّى خَمْسًا شَفَعْنَ لَهُ صَلَاتَهُ. And so if it happened that he truly prayed 5 rak'ahs, then they interceded for his prayer. I'm just translating that literally. Then they interceded for his prayer. The meaning is, he's fine. وَإِنْ كَانَ صَلَّى تَمَامَ الْأَرْبَعِ, and if it were that he is now truly completing the 4th rak'ah, كَانَتَا تَرْغِيمًا لِلشَّيْطَانِ. I'm not sure how to translate that very accurately, but has the meaning that whichever way he does, yani whichever was his case, he has defied the devil and disappointed him. He has defied and disappointed the devil. Rawahu Muslim. Imam Muslim narrated this hadith. ثم هذا في حق الإمام والمنفرد. Furthermore, this is the rule for the imam of the prayer and the one who prays alone. أما المأموم فلا يسجد إذا سهى خلف إمامه. But the follower of the imam does not prostrate for forgetfulness if he forgot while following his imam. ويتحمل الإمام سهوه. The imam will carry his forgetfulness. It means by virtue of his praying in congregation, following the imam that is, then this will patch his forgetfulness. He doesn't have to. He cannot make sujood of forgetfulness.
Yes, Sheikh, I have a question, please. My question is, this last statement that you made, would you clarify, did you say, do I understand correctly or incorrectly that the follower does not prostrate the prostrations of forgetfulness in this case after the imam?
No, we talk about the follower made his own mistake.
Oh, okay, fine. That's
Yes,
the case where the follower does not make
correct.
the Fine.
Correct.
I have it.
Follower, he made his own mistake while following the Imam, a mistake that would, had he been praying alone or had he been the Imam, a mistake that would uh, warrant prostration for forgetfulness. But since he's following the Imam, then he does not do prostration of forgetfulness.
Understood. Barakallahu fikum. Thank you.
I mean, what you
قال المصنف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. والمسنون لا يعود إليه بعد التلبس بغيره. The recommended part of the prayer, other than the hay'ah, not the form, we're not talking about the form. Some things in the prayer that are called recommended. Aren't the forms of the prayer recommended? Yes, they are, but they have their own category, so we're going to call them forms, although they are recommended. And these recommended parts that are not in the category of the forms of the prayer, we're just going to call them recommended. وَالْمَسْنُونُ لَا يَعُودُ إِلَيْهِ بَعْدَ التَّلَبُّسِ بِغَيْرِهِ. The recommended part of the prayer, which is not a form of the prayer, after engaging in another deed, then one does not go back to it. We talk about he forgot it. So he forgot that recommended part of the prayer and then moved on to a new position in the prayer. Then, if he remembers, he does not go back to that recommended part that he skipped. However, لَكِنَّهُ يَسْجُدُ لِلسَّهُ. However, he prostrates for forgetfulness. الشرح قد تقدم أن الصلاة تشتمل على أركان وأبعاد وهيئات. The explanation is that it has been presented already that the prayer consists of integrals and ab'ad, let's say segments, if you want. Ab'ad, those are the recommended things we're talking about now. Segments, major portions that are not obligatory though. These are major portions of the prayer, significant portions of the prayer that are not obligatory. So you might skip them and you didn't skip an integral of the prayer, but they are, in terms of the appearance of the prayer, significant. So that's the second type of thing that's in the prayer. And then there's the hay'at, those forms, those smaller parts of the prayer. They are they are not as significant to the performance of the prayer as those other ones we just finished talking about. فَالْأَرْكَانُ مَا لَا بُدَّ مِنْهَا. The integral parts of the prayer are what cannot be avoided. وَلَا تَصِحُّ الصَّلَاةُ بِدُونِهَا جَمِيعِهَا. And the prayer is not valid without doing every single one of those integral parts. وَأَمَّا الْأَبْعَادُ. And as for the significant optional parts of the prayer, that's just my own wording. Ab'ad is plural of ba'd. Ba'd means some or part. Ab'ad means parts or sums, or it could maybe mean dimensions. I'm just going to call it some significant optional parts of the prayer. Yeah, it means more apparent, more obvious than if I raised my hand or not, or if I bent my toes when I sat or not, or if I raised my finger or not. وَهِيَ الَّتِي سَمَّاهَا الشَّيْخُ سُنَنًا. Those are the parts of the prayer that Abu Shuja' called sunan, yani the sunnahs of the prayer. وَلَيْسَتْ مِنْ أَرْكَانِ الصَّلَاةِ. But they're not integrals of the prayer. What are they? We're going to say. You got to be patient with me. فَتُجْبَرُ بِسُجُودِ السَّهْوِ عِنْدَ تَرْكِهَا. These ones that I'm going to name for you, You don't go back to them if you skip them, but you do perform prostration of forgetfulness to patch them. Bila khilaf, without any difference in opinion. وَكَذَا عِنْدَ الْعَمْدِ عَلَى الرَّاجِحِ. No difference in opinion that you're going to do this prostration for forgetting these parts we're going to talk about. These parts we're going to list. But what if you skip them on purpose? The hefty, preponderant saying is that, and also if you leave them out on purpose, still do this sujood. 2 sujoods before you say the salam. لِوُجُودِ الْخَلَلِ الْحَاصِلِ فِي الصَّلَاةِ بِسَبَبِ تَرْكِهَا. Because it still has the same defect in the prayer. Leaving it out on purpose still results in the same defect in the prayer. So then you should do prostration of forgetfulness for not doing these sunnahs. وَهَذِهِ الْأَبْعَادُ سِتَّةٌ. There are 6 of them. 6 of these significant recommended parts. التشهد الأول, the first tashahhud. So we're talking about Maghrib prayer, Dhuhr prayer, Asr prayer, and Isha prayer. All of those have 2 tashahhuds. وَالْقُعُودُ لَهُ, and sitting for the first tashahhud also. So that means if you just prayed 3 straight rak'ahs without sitting after 2 rak'ahs to do tashahhud, whether you forgot them or you left them out on purpose, the mere fact that you skipped that and moved on beyond its place to the next portion of the prayer, to the next part out of the part of that move, then you don't go back to it. Like, let's say you forgot you were praying Maghrib or whatever, more than 2 rak'ahs. You stood up for the 3rd rak'ah and you said, oh snap, I didn't do my tashahhud, my first tashahhud. So do you now sit down because you remembered it? No. Khalas. You moved out of its position. You skipped its position. So now you just have to keep going. You can't go back. وَالْقُنُوتُ فِي الصُّبْحِ وَفِي النِّصْفِ الْأَخِيرِ مِنْ شَهْرِ رَمَضَانِ وَالْقِيَامُ لَهُ. And the 3rd thing is the dua of qunut. The dua of qunut in the Fajr prayer. After you come up from ruku' in the 2nd rak'ah, then you can do dua al-qunut. Allahumma hdini fi man hadayt, وعافني في من عافيت وتولني في من توليت, etc. Or any dua there. If you don't know that dua, you can do any dua in that position with the intention of qunut in Arabic. Even if what you know is رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً, for example. Or even less than that. Like if what you know is أَسْتَغْفِرُ with the intention of qunut, that's valid. Then you got your qunut. But if you skip that altogether, on purpose or forgetfully, then now you can do the sujood sahu. So the first thing is the first tashahhud. The second is sitting for the first tashahhud. The 3rd is doing the qunut supplication in Fajr prayer, or in the witr prayer of the last half of Ramadan, during the last half of Ramadan. And the 4th thing is standing for that dua. وَالصَّلَاةُ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ فِي التَّشَهُّدِ الْأَوَّلِ. And the 5th thing is to not say after the first tashahhud, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So in that first sitting where you do the first tashahhud, let's say you did sit and you did do the first tashahhud, but you skipped saying Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, and then you just stood right up. Then it's also now sunnah for you to do the sujood of forgetfulness. وَالصَّلَاةُ عَلَى الْآلِ فِي التَّشَهُّدِ الْأَخِيرِ. And if you forget to say in the last tashahhud, yani after the last tashahhud, when you're sitting to end your prayer, وَعَلَى آلِ مُحَمَّدٍ, that part, وَعَلَى آلِ مُحَمَّدٍ, and upon the family of Muhammad, if you forget that sentence, then it's recommended for you also to do sujudu sahu in the last rak'ah in particular. So don't get mixed up here. I didn't say in both sittings, both after both tashahhuds. So for the first tashahhud, if you skipped Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, the salah on the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, then you don't go back to it, but rather you're going to do sujudu sahu. You're going to do sujudu sahu. Then in the last tashahhud, if you don't say wa ala ali Muhammad, then also you do sujudu sahu. والأصل في التشهد الأول ما رواه البخاري ومسلم من حديث عبد الله بن بجينة. The source of the first tashahhud is what Al-Bukhari and Muslim narrated. أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ترك التشهد الأول ناسيا فسجد قبل أن يسلم. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم left out the first tashahhud forgetfully, and so he prostrated before saying the salam twice. وَإِذَا شُرِعَ السُّجُودُ لَهُ شُرِعَ لِقُعُودِهِ لِأَنَّهُ مَقْصُودٌ. And if it's sanctioned to prostrate for leaving out the first tashahhud, then it's also sanctioned to prostrate for leaving out sitting for the first tashahhud. So split those two. If it is sanctioned to prostrate for leaving out the verbal recommendation of the first tashahhud, then it's also sanctioned to prostrate for leaving out the physical recommendation of sitting for the first tashahhud. لأنه مقصود, because it is sought. That's sought also. Both of those are sought. To do that tashahhud and to sit for it. ثم قسنا عليهما القنوت وقيامه. So basically what we're saying is the evidence that you're going to make sujood for not doing tashahhud is in the hadith. That's for saying the tashahhud, not saying it. But what about the sitting part, not the saying part? Then like the saying, yani they go together. So if you left out sitting, then that also. And then you have the dua ul-qunut at Fajr time and standing for that dua. The evidence that you do sujood of forgetfulness for leaving those out is the qiyas, the legal comparison, qiyas. The Shafi'is compared this dua and standing for it to the first tashahhud and sitting for it. لأن القنوت ذكر مقصود في نفسه شرع له محل مخصوص. Because, what's the similarity? The dua of qunut is a dhikr that is sought to be done, and the religion dedicated a spot for it. So it's like the tashahhud, a dhikr that's sought to be done, and the religion dedicated a spot for it. Whose job is it to do legal comparison? The mujtahid. Our job is just to learn and practice. وَهَذَا فِي قُنُوتِ الصُّبْحِ وَالنِّصْفِ الثَّانِي مِنْ رَمَضَانِ. This is for the qunut of Fajr prayer and the qunut of Witr prayer in the last half of Ramadan. أما قنوت النازلة فلا يسجد له على الأصح في التحقيق. But there is another spot you could do dua al-qunut in all of the 5 obligatory prayers in the last rak'ah if there's a disaster. You can do dua al-qunut in the 5 obligatory prayers in the last rak'ah when you come up from ruku' if there's a disaster. But if you skip that, don't make sujood sahu. So the sujood sahu we're talking about is when you skip dua al-qunut in the Fajr prayer or in the Witr prayer in the last half of Ramadan. That's it. وأما الصلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في التشهد الأول. And as for making salah on the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام after the first tashahhud, فلأنه ذكر يجب الإتيان به في الجلوس الأخير. The reason you would make sujudu sahu for skipping that is because in the last sitting, that salah on the Prophet is actually obligatory. So in the first sitting, you shouldn't leave it out. It's so strong. So if you leave it out in the first sitting, do sujudu sahu for it. But in the last sitting, you can't leave it out because it's obligatory. فَيَسْجُدُ لِتَرْكِهِ فِي التَّشَهُّدِ الْأَوَّلِ قِيَاسًا عَلَى التَّشَهُّدِ. So then, you prostrate for leaving out that salah on the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam in the first tashahhud, like you would do for leaving out the tashahhud itself. So I'm afraid my words are very heavy now. Do you have any questions? And is the lesson clear?
Right?
Yes.
I have some confusion, like dua or qunut
Yes.
are inseparable, standing and making the zikr. How they say for not standing and for not saying. It is only one. I mean, once you do stand for dua or qunut, you do it in standing. Likewise, for tashahhud.
Yes. I don't have any elaboration there. I understand your question. I had the same question.
Yeah.
I don't.
If so, I'm not the only one. Okay, barakallahu fikum.
But I can say something. I don't have much elaboration there. But all that I can say is, like what I mentioned for you, to bring it closer to your understanding, which is the prayer. If we look at integrals of prayer, it has two types: verbal integrals and physical integrals.
Correct.
So now we're talking about some sunnah things. The first tashahhud and the dua al-qunut. We know the first tashahhud, it has a position which is sitting. And the dua al-qunut has a position which is standing. So how did they differentiate between those? Meaning, gives you the impression, is it possible to even differentiate between those while you're in the prayer? So I haven't learned that you would be able to actually differentiate between those. But at least what you can understand is, what they're saying is, there's something verbal that if you skip it, you should do sujudu sahu. And there's something physical that if you skip it, you should do sujudu sahu. The verbal thing, if you skip it, is the tashahhud itself, or the dua al-qunut itself. The physical thing, if you skip it, is the sitting for that tashahhud, or the standing for that dua al-qunut. Is there a way to separate them? Actually, I don't know it. He said, do you follow the imam in the sujood even if you don't know why he did it? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, what do you mean by disaster? Like a natural disaster?
Like if there's a war, for example.
Oh.
So
Does a hurricane? I mean, does a earthquake count?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard. Okay. The only example I remember is a war. Wafiq. And if you imagine you're in the masjid and there's bullets ringing off. Is there a minimum one could say to count as qunut? Any dua goes there with the intention of qunut in Arabic. So do you do dua al-qunut in Fajr Qada? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I have a question, like, for example, when you are praying, if you come across, like, if you don't know the rule, whether your prayer is valid or invalid, and then you have to break the prayer, and then you have to repeat it again, or you have to ask the...
If you don't know, then just finish your prayer and then ask.
Okay, barakallahu fikum.
Wafiq, that's what I learned. I asked that same question many years ago.
Okay, barakallahu fikum, Sheikh.
Wafikum. Because the person doesn't know that he should break his prayer, so he doesn't have the knowledge to do so. So he finishes his prayer, and then he asks, and then if he finds out he has to repeat his prayer, he repeats his prayer.
Yeah, well, I ask this question because they said the prayer is not valid before knowledge. You have to know what. And then that's what some people, they said, as Sheikh, you said, like, it's better to complete your prayer and ask. And some other people, they said, because of your prayer is not valid, if you don't know the rule, you have to learn, and then you have to ask. You have to break it and then repeat. That's why I'm asking.
Because if he does that, if he breaks it, then he acted without knowledge.
Oh, Oh, that's also makes sense. Yeah, barakallah fikum. Yeah.
I mean, Wafiq.
Yeah. And then the other question, like I was asking, like I was wondering if someone like purposely he escaped, recommended, and then is not seen or like not makruh, or maybe it
Can
does
you
not
repeat, please?
use, huh? Like if someone did purposely he escape in, recommended in the prayer, and then that's like is not seen or like maybe makruh, or maybe he doesn't lose his.
Well, it's not going to be a sin if it was only a recommended thing to do, but it could be makruh. Could be very makruh, yes. Depending on what he left out.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, mashallah. Barakallah.
I mean, Wafiq. That's why, brothers and sisters, if you don't know Du'a'ul Qunut, you should make it your business to learn it. Because, and if you're not, and until then, if you know some du'a, do a du'a there in that spot, because disliked to not do Du'a'ul Qunut in your Fajr prayer. I mean, Wafiqum. So at the least, for example, say Astaghfirullah or something at that position with the intention of Qunut.
وقوله, when the author Abu Shuja' said, وَالْمَثْنُونُ لَا يَعُودُ إِلَيْهِ بَعْدَ التَّلَبُّسِ بِغَيْرِهِ. The recommended part of the prayer, one does not return to it after getting engaged, after engaging in something else, after engaging in what comes after that. Meaning, he missed the spot of that recommended part of the prayer, and then he engaged in what will come after that recommended part. Once he engages in what comes after that recommended part of the prayer, he does not go back to it. That's general rule. And one of the places you need to remember that rule is where? Eid prayer. Because what's going to happen in your Eid prayer? What do you do in Eid prayer? You do takbirs. Whether you're praying alone or you're the imam. So if you forget, because you don't do Eid prayer every day, you forget to do Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar so many times. So what's going to happen? You're going to just say your first one, Allahu Akbar, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, start reciting. Then what you're going to do? You're going to be shocked right in the middle of your Fatiha. Oh, snap, I just forgot all my takbirs. So what you're going to do? Go back to them? No, don't go back to them. And then someone's going to be behind you in the prayer. He doesn't know. So he thinks you should go back, and then you're not going to go back. And now everybody's disturbed in the prayer. كما إذا قام من التشهد الأول أو ترك القنوت وسجد. Like if one, after completing the second rak'ah, stood right up for the third rak'ah and forgot the first tashahhud, or left it out, let's say, even if he left it out on purpose. Or he left out dua al-qunut for the Fajr prayer and went right down to sujood. Then what do? Do you go back to that dua al-qunut? Do you go back to that tashahhud? No. You keep going. فَلَوْ تَرَكَ التَّشَهُدَ الْأَوَّلِ وَتَلَبَّثَ بِالْقِيَامِ نَاسِيًا لَمْ يَجُزْ لَهُ الْعَوْدُ إِلَى الْقُعُودِ. So if one left out the first tashahhud and engaged in the standing position forgetfully, it is not permissible for him to return back to sitting. It's not permissible for him to sit back down. فَإِنْ عَادَ عَامِدًا عَالِمًا بِتَحْرِيمِهِ. And if he does sit back down deliberately, knowing that it's haram, بَطَلَتْ صَلَاتُهُ. Then he invalidated his prayer. لِأَنَّهُ زَادَ قُعُودًا. Because now he has added a seating position into his prayer. He added a sitting into his prayer. And the rule that invalidates the prayer is adding an extra integral. Isn't sitting for the prayer an integral? Yes, it is. Except, when it's sunnah, but sitting is an integral of the prayer. So if he missed the spot, he can't go back to it, because if he goes back to it, then he will be adding an integral, a physical integral. And this will invalidate the prayer. وَإِنْ عَادَ نَاسِيًا لَمْ تَبْطُلْ. But if he does sit back down forgetfully, it will not invalidate the prayer. وَعَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَقُومَ عِنْدَ تَذَكُّرِهِ. And then when he remembers that he wasn't supposed to do that, then he needs to stand back up. وَيَسْجُدُ لِلسَّهْوِ. And then at the end, before he says salam, he will make 2 sujuds of forgetfulness. وَإِنْ كَانَ جَاهِلًا بِتَحْرِيمِهِ. And if he were ignorant that that's haram, فَالْأَصَحُ أَنَّهُ كَالنَّاسِ. then what's most accurate is that being ignorant in this case is like being forgetful. So it means then he's not going to invalidate his prayer. هذا حكم المنفرد والإمام. This is the judgment of the one who prays alone or the one who leads the prayer. The one who leads the prayer, he's similar to the one who prays alone. What's similar between them? Their prayer is not linked to someone else's prayer, doesn't depend on someone else's prayer. The Imam of the Jama'ah prayer and the one who prays solo, what's similar to those between those is that their prayer is not dependent on someone else's prayer. وَأَمَّا الْمَأْمُومِ, but concerning the follower in the prayer, he's the one who's following the Imam in the congregational prayer. فَإِذَا تَلَبَّثَ إِمَامُهُ بِالْقِيَامِ, if his Imam engages in the standing position, we're saying he left out the tashahhud, the first tashahhud, and he stood up. فَلَا يَجُوزُ لَهُ التَّخَلُّفُ عَنْهُ, it won't be permissible for the follower to defy the Imam لأجل التشهد, for the sake of his tashahhud, and then he sits while the Imam is standing. Because this is a significant difference. This is a significant difference between the Imam and the follower. The Imam is standing and the follower is sitting. It's not like the Imam raised his hands to say Allahu Akbar and the follower Allahu Akbar without raising his hands. That's not significant difference. It's not like the Imam put his hands between his chest and his navel and the follower just kept his hands at his side. Or the Imam, when he sat in iftirash and he stood his foot up and he bent his toes and the follower just didn't sit like that. These are small differences between the Imam and the follower. But this one, the Imam stood up and abandoned the first tashahhud, and the follower says, I want to do that, and he sits. This is a big difference. This is a significant difference. In fact, it's an abominable difference. It's ugly for the follower to differ with his Imam in this way. فَإِن فَعَلَ بَطَلَتْ صَلَاتُهُ, if he does that, then his prayer will be invalidated. وَلَوْ قَعَدَ الْإِمَامُ لِلتَّشَهُّدِ الْأَوَّلِ مَأْمُومٌ نَاسِيًا. And now this is a detailed case we're talking about here too. In particular, we're talking about what? If the Imam does the tashahhud or not, the first tashahhud, and the follower defies him. Whichever one the Imam does, the follower does contrary. This case requires study so that you don't forget it because it has details. So we just said, if the Imam skips it and stands up, the follower must skip it even though the follower remembered it. Let's say the Imam forgot it, the follower remembers it. You have to stay in unison with your Imam here. If you do it, although your Imam did not do it, then this will invalidate your prayer. وَلَوْ قَعَدَ الْإِمَامُ لِلتَّشَهُّدِ الْأَوَّلِ. Now, other case for the first tashahhud. وَقَامَ الْمَأْمُومُ, and the follower stood up, nasiyan, forgetfully, not on purpose. فَالصَّحِيحُ وُجُوبُ الْعَوْدِ إِلَى مُتَابَعَةِ الْإِمَامِ. What's correct is that he's obligated to sit back down or to sit down and be in unison with his Imam. فَإِن لَمْ يَعُدْ بَطَلَتْ صَلَاتُهُ, and if he does not sit down, he will invalidate his prayer. فَإِن تَعَمَّدَ الْمَأْمُومُ تَرْكَ التَّشَهُّدِ الْأَوَّلِ وَقَامَ لَمْ تَبْطُلْ صَلَاتُهُ. Now, what I just told you, that's if he forgot. But what if he did it on purpose? He didn't forget. On purpose, he stood up and left out the first tashahhud and left his Imam sitting. This will not invalidate his prayer. How's that? لِأَنَّهُ خَرَجَ مِنْ فَرْضٍ إِلَى فَرْضٍ. Because in this case, he went from one obligation to another obligation. The first obligation was his second prostration. And then instead of sitting to recite tashahhud, which is sunnah, he stood up for the next rak'ah, which is obligatory, an obligatory part of the prayer. So he went from an obligation, which is prostrating, to an obligation, which is standing for the next rak'ah. Though he left his Imam sitting in a sunnah, here he did not invalidate his prayer. I'm going to repeat. We're talking about skipping something optional in the prayer. But remember, when we say optional, there's two types of optional things in the prayer. There is the optional type that if you skip it, you don't make sujudu sahu. Those are the hayat, those forms of the prayer. And there's the optional type that if you skip it or miss it, you do make sujudu sahu. Those are first tashahhud and dua al-kunut and some others. But let's just say that for now. That's easy enough. First tashahhud and dua al-kunut. You skip those, you make sujudu sahu. So if someone stood up and abandoned the first tashahhud, or he went down to sujud immediately, abandoning dua al-kunut, then he doesn't go back to them, first of all. If he left out the first tashahhud and engaged in standing forgetfully, then he can't sit back down. If he sat back down on purpose while knowing that's haram, his prayer is invalidated because he added an additional sitting to the prayer. But if he sat back down forgetfully, will not invalidate his prayer, and he has to stand back up when he remembers that he wasn't supposed to sit back down. That means you need to study so that that sticks. Good chance that what I just said is going to leave you if you don't study it. So take notes. And don't rely on someone else to record the lesson for you. And if the person sat back down ignorantly, then it's like he's forgetful. So also will not invalidate his prayer. That's for someone who prays alone or for someone who leads the prayer. Now, as for the follower of the imam, he has to do what his imam does. If his imam sits for tashahhud, he has to sit. If his imam stands up, he has to stand up. If his imam engages in standing, then it's not permissible for him to defy his imam because he wants to do the tashahhud. And if he does that, he will invalidate his prayer. And if the imam sat for the first tashahhud and the follower stood up forgetfully, then what's correct is that it's obligatory on him to sit back down. And if he doesn't, then his prayer will be invalidated. That's if he stood up forgetfully. Now, if he stood up on purpose, so he left his imam sitting and he stood up on purpose for the next rak'ah, then what's correct is that he did not invalidate his prayer because he moved from an obligation to an obligation. But that's haram though, because it's a major sin to precede your imam. You cannot go ahead of the imam. That's a major sin. Going ahead of the imam is a major sin. Okay, up till there. Any question? You said, so if they purposely moved from an obligatory position to sunnah, does this invalidate? Do you have an example? Okay, so let's take the example we just said here. The imam skipped the first tashahhud and stood up. So the imam went from an obligation to an obligation. And the follower defied his imam. And he sat anyway, which means he went from an obligation to a sunnah. So he invalidated his prayer. Do you still have a question, Sister Hadia?
Yes, I do have a question. I just didn't want to mix it up. I wrote, if the follower stood up intentionally and left his imam sitting in a sunnah, my question is, which sunnah would he be leaving an imam for an obligation?
The sunnah of first tashahhud.
He did not invalidate. But did I make a mistake by writing, in this case, he did not invalidate his prayer?
No, you didn't make a mistake because he moved from an obligation to an obligation.
Which obligation did the follower move from?
From second sujud to standing for the next rak'ah.
Oh. So the imam was still sitting in the sunnah?
Yes.
Ah, okay. That's much clearer. He was sitting. And so wait a minute. Did the follower precede him by two?
No.
The sujud and the
No, just one. He's just stood up.
But the imam was still sitting.
Yes, so he preceded him by one only. which is that, let's say, the Imam prostrated and the follower prostrated, so they're together. He didn't proceed as Imam. Then the Imam sat for a Sunnah, which is the first tashahhud, and the follower stood up. So he proceeded as Imam by one.
Okay.
But he went from an obligation to an obligation. So he didn't invalidate his prayer, but that's haram to go ahead of the Imam.
If that I understood the second part, but I didn't understand about if it's the first tashahhud, why would that be an obligation?
No, the first tashahhud is not an obligation.
But
The
in the
first tashahhud is a sunnah. The Imam is doing the sunnah. The follower skipped that sunnah. He went from an obligation, which is the second sujood, to an obligation, which is standing.
Barakallahu fikum. Thank you guys.
So, mashallah, that's good here, this detailed case. That's good that you think about that and ponder on that and master that. Me too, inshallah, because this is fiqh. This exactly is what's fiqh. This is prophetic knowledge. Fiqh, the detailed rules. If it's like this, then it's like that. If it's not like this, then it's not going to be like that. Those branches and offshoots, that's fiqh. That make your mind strong. So understand those. Some people, Allah gives them a natural knack for the fiqh. It's easy for them. These details come like this to them by the will of Allah. Some people, it's not so easy. They need to study and review. Now back to the Imam and the one who prays alone. أما إذا تعمد ذلك ثم عاد قبل الانتصاب والاعتداء. If the Imam or the one who prays alone on purpose skips this first tashahhud to stand up, but then before he completely stands up, he goes back down. Before he's standing erect, he cuts himself off from standing all the way back up so that he can sit back down. فإن عاد بعدما صار إلى القيام أقرب بطلت صلاته. Then you need to look. Is he closer to standing or closer to sitting? If he's closer to standing and then he cut himself off to sit back down, he will invalidate his prayer. وَإِنْ عَادَ قَبْلَهُ لَمْ تَبْطُلْ. But if he goes back down to sit, if he sits back down before he's closer to being standing up, means he's closer to still being sitting, then it does not invalidate his prayer. لم تبطل. هذا كله في من ترك التشهد الأول وانتصب قائما. All of this is about the person who left out the first tashahhud to stand up. أما إذا انتهض ناسيا وتذكر قبل الانتصاب. Yani all of this, what we just said, this is for the one who did that on purpose. But the one who stood up forgetfully, yani, had he not forgotten, he wanted to sit down to recite tashahhud. He would have wanted to sit to recite tashahhud, but he forgot and he started to stand back up. وَتَذَكَّرَ قَبْلَ الْانْتِصَابِ. And he remembered before he was standing up completely. فَقَالَ الشَّافِعِيُّ وَالْأَصْحَابِ يَرْجِعُ إِلَى التَّشَهُّدِ. Imam al-Shafi'i and his disciples, and I mean by disciples, the mujtahids in his madhab, they said he's allowed to sit back down. وَالْمُرَادُ مِنَ الْانْتِصَابِ الْاِعْتِدَالُ وَالْإِسْتِوَاءُ. That part's already clear from what I said. I don't need to translate that. ثم إذا عاد قبل الانتصاب فهل يسجد للسهو. Now, if he did sit back down before he was completely standing up straight, this one who forgot, does he make sujood for forgetfulness? Qawlan. There's two sayings. Al-azharu annahu la yasjud. What's most apparent is that he should not prostrate for forgetfulness here. وَإِنْ صَارَ إِلَى الْقِيَامِ أَقْرَبُ. Even if he were closer to standing than to sitting, he doesn't make sujood sahu here. Wallahu a'lam. And Allah knows best. Any question here?
Yes, Sheikh. My question is, leaving out the first tashahhud to stand up, the one who prays alone skips this on purpose before completely standing up and goes to sit back down. If he is closer to standing and he sits back down, does this invalidate his prayer? He was out of forgetfulness. He was closer to standing, but
no, if he's forgetful, and then it doesn't invalidate his prayer.
Oh, wait a minute. What did you say? If he's forgetful, it does not invalidate.
If he's forgetful, it does not invalidate his prayer. If the person stood up, but he would have, had he been mindful, he would have sat for his tashahhud, so he didn't really want to stand up. So that means when he started standing up, it was because he forgot.
Yes.
And then he remembered before he was completely erect standing. Then a Shafi'i and his disciples said he can go back and sit down in this case because he forgot. Even if he was closer to standing than to sitting. And then there's a question, should he make sujood sahu? What's most apparent is that he does not make sujood sahu in this case.
I have it, thank you. I didn't mean to give that case. I understood that better because I would be good to review it. My concern was the one who prays by alone and he leaves out the first tashahhud to stand up on purpose before completely standing up, sits back down. And then I interjected if he is closer to standing and sits back down. So there are two.
This will invalidate his prayer.
Okay.
No. Wallahu a'lam. قال المصنف رحمه الله. The author, Abu Shuja', may Allah have mercy upon him, said, وَالْهَيْئَةُ لَا يَعُودُ إِلَيْهَا بَعْدَ تَرْكِهَا. The hay'ah, the smaller form of the prayer, the smaller parts that contribute to the form of the prayer, those 15 that we counted, inshallah, you've studied. One does not go back to them after passing them, whether he's imam or praying alone or follower. وَلَا يَسْجُدُ لِلسَّهْوِ عَنْهَا. Nor does he make sujood sahu for any of those 15 forms. وَإِذَا شَكَّ فِي عَدَدِ مَا أَتَى بِهِ مِنَ الرَّكَعَاتِ. And if one doubted about the number of rak'ahs he performed, بَنَى عَلَى الْيَقِينِ. Then he builds on certainty, not doubt. Rather, you throw the doubt away. And what would be the certainty? وَهُوَ الْأَقَلُّ. The lower number. That's what you're certain of, always. That's the rule. You're not sure. Did you pray 2 rak'ahs or 3 rak'ahs? Then really you're doubting if you prayed 3. You're sure you prayed 2. You're not doubting if you prayed 2, really. You're doubting if you prayed 3. Or you're not sure. Did you divorce your wife 2 times or 3 times? Then really you're doubting if you divorced her 3 times and you're sure you divorced her 2 times. Or you're doubting, did you divorce her 1 time or 2 times? Then really you're sure you divorced her 1 time. You're doubting if you did it 2 times. So whenever you're doubtful about the number of whatever it was, then the rule is you build on certainty and throw the doubt away, even in the case of divorce. What if you really divorced her 3 times in reality? But you're not sure, so you throw the doubt away. Just like, what if you really prayed 4 rak'ahs and you're not sure if you prayed 3 or 4? You throw the doubt away and you say, I prayed 3. Same rule. What if the devil bothers you there? Then you need to stand your ground and say, the rule is the rule. وَيَسْجُدُ سُجُودَ السَّهْوِ. And then you prostrate for forgetfulness when you are throwing away this doubt and building on the lower number of rak'ahs. وَمَحَلُّهُ قَبْلَ السَّلَامِ. Its spot is before the salam. 2 sujuds. Before the salam, وَهُوَ sunnah, and it's a recommendation, not an obligation. الشرح. The explanation. الهيئات هي الأمور المسنونة غير الأبعاد. The hayat, the smaller parts that contribute to the form of the prayer. They are the recommended parts of the prayer that are not the more significant, bigger, more significant recommended parts. كالتسبيح وتكبير الانتقال, like saying Subhanallah, and like saying Allahu Akbar for going from one move to the next move. وَالتَّعَوُّذِ وَنَحْوِهِ, and like saying أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فَلَا يَسْجُدُ لَهَا بِحَالٍ. One does not prostrate for these at all. سَوَاءٌ تَرَكَهَا عَمْدًا أَوْ سَهْوًا, whether he abandoned them on purpose or forgetfully. وَسُجُودُ السَّهْوِ سُنَّةٌ. The prostration of forgetfulness is recommended. وَمَحَلُّهُ قَبْلَ السَّلَامِ. Its spot is before saying the salam. And 2 salams is sunnah, 1 salam is obligatory. So even if you want to do your 1 obligatory salam, sujood sahu is before the salam. فَإِنْ سَلَّمَ الْمُصَلِّي عَامِدًا عَالِمًا بِالسَّهْوِ أَوْ نَاسِيًا وَطَالَ الْفَصْلُ عُرْفًا فَاتَ مَحَلُّهُ. If the praying person said his salam intentionally, knowing, remembering that he forgot something, knowing that now it is time for, or the spot for sujood sahu. Basically, he's skipping sujood sahu on purpose. Or if he forgot to make sujood sahu, and then there was a long time he said the salam, and then there was a long time after he said salam, and then he remembered sujood sahu, وَطَالَ الْفَصْلُ عُرْفًا فَاتَ مَحَلُّهُ, then he missed it. So if he skipped it on purpose, then he missed it. Or he forgot to do sujood sahu, and he said the salam, and then there was a long time, and then he remembered, then he missed it. وَإِنْ قَصُرَ الْفَصْلُ عُرْفًا لَمْ يَفُتْ. But if he forgot to do this sujood, and then he said the salam, and then he remembered shortly after the salam, then he can act as if he never said the salam and just do his sujood sahu anyway, and then say the salam again. وَإِنْ قَصُرَ الْفَصْلُ عُرْفًا لَمْ يَفُتْ وَحِينَئِذٍ فَلَهُ السُّجُودُ وَتَرْكُهُ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. And Allah knows best. We'll stop there. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.